Okay, Madam Chair, I think we're ready to start the work session. We're going to start with a presentation on the zoning code rewrite update.
Perfect.
Good evening, commissioners. For the record, Andrea Tuning. I am in our long range planning division. And when we started the zoning code rewrite, we promised that we would keep you apprised as we moved along and also let you know everything that we've heard from our community. So we finished up modules 1 and 2 of the zoning code rewrite. And after that, we took a step back and said, hey, we've heard a lot of really good information from our community. We want to make sure that we're doing our zoning code right because of the importance of it. And so we revised modules 1 and 2. And so we wanted to share with you what we learned from the community and how we've taken a small pivot to address their concerns. So as I noted before, we really started off the project officially in the fall of 2020. And then we moved on to the module 1, which really talks about the zoning districts and those uses that are allowed in those zoning districts in the spring of 2021. Once we completed all of our surveys, our office hours, and our community conversations that we had with the community, we moved on to module 2, which got into more of those design standards. It talks about how much parking you should have, how tall your building should be, densities that might be allowed, and any type of design standards that are applicable to whatever you might be proposing. We took that out to our public in the spring of 2022. And we held 2 public surveys. We had a number of different neighborhood conversations, which we met with people in various areas of the city. And then we also had some targeted outreach where we met with 15 different groups. Then, after we gathered all of that feedback, we had heard, hey, we don't think you have it quite right. And so we agreed and we said, let's take a look at this and revise modules 1 and 2. And then we hit the road in July. And so that's where we're at right now. So we're just preparing for module 3, but we wanted to let you know before we move on what happened with that revised piece. And so really what we heard from that community outreach is that not every neighborhood is the same. And so a one-size-fits-all approach simply wasn't going to work. And they wanted us to really evaluate and appreciate that neighborhoods are different. They wanted us to consider the impacts of growth on our existing infrastructure, primarily our roadways, our water resources, as well as our sewer capacities, and schools as well as what we heard. We also heard that sustainability and affordability is critical in any type of city. And we heard that time and time again. And then we also heard that we don't want to grow everywhere. We want to preserve our foothills. We want to preserve our desert areas, and we want to preserve sensitive areas such as the Boise River. And so we agreed with that. And so we evaluated really what our goals were. And when we evaluated one of those is having a really great variety of neighborhoods. So not every neighborhood needs to look the same, and really appreciating that. Developing where we have the public investment happening. So whether that's through our pathways, whether that is through our transit lines, as particularly our best-in-class transit lines, and then having a strategy to produce those sustainable and affordable, not only housing units, but also structures throughout the city as well. And then managing the growth edges of our city. So not developing everywhere, but developing where we want and where we have existing infrastructure. So when we looked at those variety of neighborhoods, we recognize that there's large lots, suburban lots, and traditional lots, and there's all different types of forms that come with that as well. So we might see compact development and urban development as well. When we did take a look at what those residential zones are, we did make some minor adjustments. So where you see bold or where you see a circle is where we made adjustments. R1A is circled because originally we had proposed to eliminate that. We have proposed to merge R1A and R1B together. And if we're going to address that we have a variety of neighborhoods, we thought that R1A should come back. We also identified, of course, that there would be density associated with R1A, R1B, and R1C. So before we did not have densities that were actually capping what could happen there. We were letting the form, such as setbacks, building height, and parking requirements, determine what that density is. We also reevaluated the lot size of R1c. So in our original proposal, you would notice that we had 4,000 square foot as an option, and we reduced that to 3,500 square feet. And the reason that we have done that is if you take 43,560 square feet, which is in 1 acre, and divide that by 12, you end up with 3,500. We also evaluated some of those building heights, specifically in the R1c, R2, and R3. And so we did adjust those heights slightly. In the R1c, it went from 35 to 40. In R2, it went from 35 to 45. And then in R3, we went from 45 to 50. We did make some allowed uses adjustments as well, and that's specifically to the R1c, R2, and R3. So an attached townhouse product would now be allowed in those zones, as well as neighborhood markets. So you'll see that there is an allowance for some small retail to exist in some of our neighborhoods, which is what we heard from our community. There are specific requirements that go with that. So in the R1c, you have to be a corner lot. In R2, there are some design standards as well as R3. But there are allowances because people wanted to walk. They wanted to have places where they could grab coffee, grab a cocktail, grab something quick to eat, or even those small retail uses that are there. We also have some fourplexes that have started to emerge as an allowed use in that R2 zone, as well as some apartment building in the R2 and R3. So it's much more of an allowed use rather than requiring somebody to go through a conditional use permit to get there. And then, of course, we did have some incentives, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about those here in just a little bit. But really, those are allowed in the R1A, B, and C if you can meet certain criteria. And so we really focus on what is important. So developing in those areas where we've identified that we have investment, as well as creating affordable and sustainable designs that lend itself to our long-term goals. So that really gets us started, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Deanna, and she's going to kind of walk through some of those criteria for you and how we've changed our modeling.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. My name is Deanna Dupuy. I'm in the planning department. And as Andrea said, I'm going to speak to our second goal, which is about directing development where we have planned public investment. So in our previous draft, we had a mixed use district. We had mixed use districts that were kind of across the city where we had previously commercial zone districts. But instead, we've taken a new look at this and really said, as we have a changing city and a growing city, we want to direct that development where we have investment. And there's lots of areas within the city that we've been investing in for decades and have been planning to invest in. So we want to use private development to help us further those public investments. So we know we have our downtown districts. State Street has been a corridor of interest for the city for many years. And we have an ultimate vision of bus rapid transit, or using much better high quality transit on State Street. So we've been working very steadily on building that out, and we want to align our zoning to support that. There's 4 State Street transit stations that we've identified, and I'll walk through those, as well as we have other transit routes that we've been investing in. State Street, as I said, Fairview and Vista each have transit that run every 15 minutes during the peak hour, which is actually excellent transit service, and then 30 minutes all day. So we want to direct development there so residents who are new residents can use that investment. As well, we have our pathway corridors. We know the Greenbelt is an excellent amenity to our city, so we should be directing development there so that new residents can use that infrastructure, as well as our Federal Way bikeway. And then across the city, and I know this is difficult to see in the map, we have several regional activity centers. So thinking the Boise Town Square Mall, and then downtown, as well as Micron. And then we have community activity centers, which are scattered about, but they're intersections where we know community members can really meet a lot of their needs without having to drive far distances. So supporting investment there. So as I said, we want to first focus our growth within downtown. And this is not going to change dramatically from what we have already in our existing zoning code, but we're proposing this to be called MX5, which is the mixed use downtown zone. As it is now, there's no density calculation. We do have some floor area ratio that we're removing. But probably what's most significant about this is we have areas within our downtown that still have some suburban zoning. So C2, general commercial. Those are areas over by Shoreline, by the river that we want to proactively rezone to MX5 because that fits that downtown development pattern. We want to be focusing our growth within our downtown core. And then, as I said, we want to really build out State Street to be a great corridor for transit and transit-oriented development. So we've identified 4 very small nodes at this point, but there are 4 station areas on State Street. So we have Whitewater, Collister, Glenwood and Gary, and Horseshoe Bend. So just these intersections on State, we've identified as primary transit stops as we build out our State Street plans. And this would allow for our next most intense development. It would be a 60-foot height limit, but if you're able to provide affordable or sustainable housing, you would be able to surpass that. And Lena will talk more about that in our incentives. As well as we're really putting strict requirements on streetscapes here because we want to create an active street frontage. On State Street, we have plans for a multi-use path, and this would be a strict requirement of any new development within these areas to have that multi-use path. And additionally, with this zone, so MX4, and then I'll talk about MX3, we've really gone through that table of allowed uses and weeded out uses that aren't conducive to a comfortable walking and biking environment. So thinking we don't want to see drive-throughs in these areas anymore. We want to see development that's going to support a vibrant street life and make transit there more viable. And as I said, the next one is MX3, which is our mixed use active. So this is the next highest intensity zone district that we really want to focus our growth and development. Again, this has a 60-foot height limit, and it's going to have very strict requirements for streetscape, again, trying to make a more active, comfortable environment for our residents. You'll see it is a bit more incumbency across the city, but it's those best-in-class transit routes, so State Street, Vista, Fairview, activity centers, and our pathway corridors. And then this, as we build out this vision of MX3 or mixed use active corridors, we know that we're going to have to be mindful about our transitions as we transition into our great neighborhoods that we want to maintain. So we're proposing that along State, Vista, and Fairview, we convert our lower density single family zones into R2, which is a more mixed, it's the compact residential zoning. So allowing a little bit more development potential there so that it goes from the commercial buildings to higher intensity residential zoning into our single family district. So we're really allowing a more gradual or even organic transition from those corridors into our neighborhoods. And we recognize there's going to be areas in our cities that can't be this active dream or won't, we still need to access the drive-through. We still need to access some goods and services. So that more traditional commercial use will be in our MX2. And then our last one is mixed use neighborhood or MX1. And this is our small scale coffee shop, ice cream store, really what we envision as we think of neighborhood centers. And you'll see this is pretty distributed pretty well across the city. I know it's a little light in this map, but it's really giving all neighborhoods a special place that they could walk to with their families or after work, just to have somewhere nearby that's going to be that more small scale neighborhood surfing. And then I'll let Lena speak to our incentives.
Hello, Commission. Lena Walker, Planning and Development Services. Apologies for the casual dress, but it's very cold in here, so I'm keeping it on. So just really quickly, there's a lot of information on these next few slides, but I'll try to walk quickly through it. And then, of course, if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. So Deanna had mentioned that we have some strategies to produce affordable and sustainable development. And there's a couple different incentives that have been included into the revised draft of the code. So the first incentive here is for the large lot, suburban, and sort of traditional zones. So that would be R1A, R1B, and R1C. Previously, we had said that the previous draft had proposed to allow up to a fourplex in all residential zones. What this draft now proposes is that you could build a triplex or up to a fourplex within these zones if the development has one of three or two of those four units dedicated as affordable to households earning 80% AMI for a rental product or 120% AMI for an ownership product or below for a period of 50 years. In addition to that, there would be requirements around design and infrastructure elements that help to meet our sustainability goals. So that would have to do with energy usage, water usage, things that are really built into the actual construction of the building itself. We're also proposing a strategic infill incentive, and the purpose of this is to really take a tailored and specific approach to implementing that sort of small scale density that fits well into various types of neighborhood environments and can really take advantage of vacant or underutilized parcels within existing areas, achieving that infill on a scale that meets with the character of a neighborhood, but also allows for a more efficient use of our land and our resources. A couple different things about this incentive. It would apply in certain locations, so that would be the R1B or R1C zone, and also if you are within 300 feet of a collector road or minor arterial, or within a quarter mile of a property that would be zoned MX3. What you see on that map there would be all parcels that meet those locational requirements. In addition to that, there are some site-specific characteristics that you would need to have in order to qualify for this incentive. You would need a certain amount of frontage. It would need to be a vacant lot or one where the improvement or structure value is not greater than 25% of the total assessed value. Or if you can incorporate the existing structure and not have to totally remove something that was there before. And of course, you couldn't have an approved demolition permit within the past 3 years because we do want to incentivize this small scale infill, but we don't want to see just a bunch of buildings being knocked down to build something else on top of it. So trying to really speak to that preservation, but then also how can we open up opportunities for folks that want to see a little more density on their lot. And what this incentive would get you is you could do 3 to 4 units with no additional requirements, as long as you were within all of those site-specific requirements I mentioned. 5 to 8 units with one of those units dedicated affordable, and then up to 12 units if 2 of those units are dedicated affordable at 80% AMI. So you can see on the left there just sort of an example, a basic visual of the kind of infill that this is referring to. And here's also some other examples that you might see around Boise. So, you know, this could be cottage court development. It could be duplex, it could be a triplex or a fourplex, something that looks a little bit more like an attached townhome product. There's a lot of room for experimentation or innovation within this incentive. In the mixed use zones, the affordable and sustainable incentives would allow for a parking reduction and a possible height allowance if 1/4 of all of those units are affordable to households earning 60% AMI or below for 50 years. So a little bit higher bar there on the affordability. And again, having those sustainability requirements incorporated into how that building is constructed. And then finally, you know, as we mentioned with, you know, how do we manage growth on the edges of our city? We've proposed a couple different ways to help implement that desired outcome. So one would be the creation of a new zone for open lands, O3, that really allows us when we bring in land on the fringes of the city, we have an actual zone that we could use to give some intention behind how that property is being brought in, not just sort of into a holding pattern, but some intention behind this is what we envision for how we will develop in the future. In addition to codifying some of our overlay zones like the wildland urban interface, which you can see in the yellow around the edges there, that matches the overlay shared by the county. And then also the Boise River System overlay. And then finally, as we move into module 3 in the fall, looking at our processes and procedures, we'll need to examine, you know, how we approach annexation from a policy perspective and how that's reflected in our code. So finally, with our next steps, again, we'll have a release of that consolidated draft, including Module 3, coming up this fall, with slated to be in October. And that's it for us today. But of course, we'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission has. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
I have one. And it may be not like too far ahead, but going back to the MX5, how would that code change impact our historic districts that lie within that region? Thank you.
Hello, commissioners, Commissioner Manato. I think and I think this goes for any of the historic districts within, regardless of whether it's MX5 or R1c. We're not proposing to change the historic district structure as is. So the base zoning, how you review a project now with base zoning, that is changing, but any of the historic district guidelines that control form would stay in effect.
Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, do you have a question? Sorry, I guess we do have
I have
one.
another kind of sidebar from the zoning code rewrite. So Andrea, you're in charge of long range planning for the city. Is there, at some point, will long range planning look at the historic preservation plan along with the historic preservation department, the plans from 1979 that was adopted? So how does historic preservation fit into the city's zoning code rewrite for the future? Like what do you see this program doing in the future?
Well, Commissioner Malloy, that's really a great question. We actually had a little conversation about that today. And so as we're evaluating our 5-year strategic plan in planning and development services, we will take a deep dive into what does historic preservation look like in the future. I don't see it going away, certainly. We have our historic district overlays that we are certainly carrying over as we truly appreciate, where our city has been, but taking a look at it a little bit differently. So we have other areas of the city that are starting to age. So where do we survey? Where is it appropriate to expand some historic overlays or even implement new districts? So we'll be evaluating that over the next several years to take a look at that. And then I know that we have talked about reevaluating what some of those historic preservation standards are in both the guidelines for residential and commercial. And so you might see some updates to that, but I think we're going to see our historic districts, continue to thrive. And then we might even see some new ones depending on how that strategic plan lays out.
Thank you. And I hope we're a part of all those conversations in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything else? I guess not. Thank you very much. That was very formative. I like the changes that were implemented and can't wait to see the next draft of it when it comes out.
Thank you. And we will probably see you in November or December once we finish up with our Module 3 outreach and hopefully have some new information to share at that time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. All right, thank you. We will move to the table rock room for the rest of the work session. Food's waiting in there.
All right. Thank you. Today is the 29th of August, 2022. This is the scheduled time and place for the Historic Preservation Commission hearing. I'm Chairperson Weaver, and I now call the meeting to order. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Otter.
Present.
Kintai. Malloy.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Montoto.
Here.
Maroney.
Here.
Koski. Pape.
Here.
6 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. Have all the commissioners had a chance to review the meeting minutes from the July 25th, 2022 meeting? Does anybody have any comments or changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I will now take a motion on the July 25th, 2022 minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve the minutes from July 25th, 2022 hearing.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Montoto. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Maroney. Christina, can you please call the roll?
Otter.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Weaver.
Aye.
Montoto.
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Pape.
Aye.
All in favor. Motion carries.
All right, great, thank you. We have no items up for deferral tonight, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. I believe we have 2 possible items for the consent agenda, beginning with DRH 22-00242, Amy Algier. And this was actually deferred from the July 25th hearing. Does anybody from the commission have any questions on this matter? Okay, hearing none. Is the applicant present? Okay,
We are here.
okay, thank you. Are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of approval?
We are.
Okay, thank you. Was there any written opposition to this matter?
Madam Chair, there was not.
Okay, is there anyone here wishing to testify against this matter? Okay, no one online. Okay, great. Seeing none, and based on the representation of the applicant and lack of opposition, item DRH 22-00242 will be placed on the consent agenda. The second item we have in consideration for the consent agenda is item DRH 22-00249, Eric DeBoard. And this was also deferred from the July 25th, 2022 hearing. Does the commission have any questions on this matter? Okay, great. Is the applicant present? Okay, are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of approval? Okay, thank you. Was there any written opposition to this matter?
Madam Chair, no, there was not.
Great. Is there anyone present wishing to testify against this matter? Okay, great. Seeing none, based on the representation of the applicant and the lack of opposition, item DRH 22-00249 will be placed on the consent agenda. I therefore move that the consent agenda and all items on the consent agenda be approved, subject to all the findings and conclusions and conditions of approval agreed upon for each item. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Montoto. Christina, can you please call the roll?
Otter.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Weaver.
Aye.
Montoto.
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Pape.
Aye.
All in favor. Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Those that are here for the consent agenda are free to head out. All right, great. Okay, we'll now move on to the remaining items on the agenda. We have 2 remaining items. The first one to be heard tonight is DRH 22-00300, Scott Rebar at 1511 North 5th Street. Staff, can we please have the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The applicant has come before you tonight to request approval of an accessory dwelling unit to be placed over a new detached garage on property at 1511 North 5th Street in the north end, and it is a contributing property. The property is located on the west side of 5th Street, very near the intersection of 5th and Sherman, and north of Ada Street. There's an existing single-story home covering a large portion of the lot that has had additions constructed over the years. There was an addition constructed, I believe, in the there was one in 2015. And then in 2006, there were additions constructed to the home. So it does take up a fair amount of the lot. And that relates directly to the applicant's proposal to go vertical with an accessory dwelling unit above the garage. This is the existing residence as seen from the street. And the site plan with that proposed garage and ADU in the northwest corner of the property, accessed from the alley. The applicant's initial plans did exceed the 1,000 square feet for reduced setbacks. They have submitted revised plans that drop that to 998 feet below the 1,000, so they can get the reduced setbacks in the rear yard along the alley for the accessory structure. The applicant's proposal is approximately 1 foot 9 inches taller than that existing single-story home. It is a fairly low hip roof structure. So to stay within lot coverage, again, had to go vertical with the accessory dwelling unit above the garage, and just couldn't get it to be lower than the height of the house. But it is minimized. There is a steep pitched roof with some smaller dormers on the side elevations proposed that do really help minimize the appearance of mass and height of that ADU. But again, it is about 1 foot 9 inches taller than that existing home. Some perspective drawings. The applicant worked with the neighbor to the, it would be, believe the north. I'll let the applicant confirm that, but worked with them on minimizing windows and privacy concerns on those windows facing that property. And I believe they have their neighbor's support on this proposal. So with that, we have recommended conditions, or I'm sorry, approval with conditions. And I would stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? I do have one question for you. Is that height higher than the roof of the adjacent house, or is it the chimney?
Madam Chair, I believe it's the peak of the roof. That's how it was described in the application, but I'll let the applicant confirm that.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? Okay, is the applicant present?
Yes, this is Scott Wybar. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah, thank you. Go ahead and state your name and address for the record, and then you have 20 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Scott Wybar. I live at 442 West Thatcher Street in Boise. And I think I guess to answer right off the bat, one of the questions about the height of the structure. So that was above the roof of the house, the highest sort of ridge line of the hip roof, not the chimney. And I think that pretty much all the conditions were well described in that introduction. We basically have sort of made this the lowest possible structure that we could to fit the a reasonable living area above. The garage ceiling is as low as we can make it to still fit even a 7-foot garage door. And then we've basically lowered the roof as far down as we possibly can, so it's essentially on the floor of the ceiling of the garage. So we did really all that we could to set the roof line as low as we could. I think that the steep roof actually helps quite a bit to reduce the scale of the garage, because the walls of the structure, the eaves, actually sit quite a bit lower and give the appearance that the building is lower. If we would have tried maybe something else with a less steep roof, the walls begin to get really tall and feel taller than they should be. And the scale of the eaves on this is actually very similar to the eaves of the existing garage, which will be removed if this is approved. I think that the other thing is that we set we placed the garage on the north side of the lot, which is adjacent to another existing garage, which is essentially about the exact same mass. I don't know if I think that like that site plan is zoomed in a little bit, but there's a garage right across the property line from that. So any openings in this this proposed ADU looking north would just be looking at that garage basically. And so the property to the south is blocked by there's a big existing maple tree you can see to the south of the deck. So it's set quite a bit back from that property to the south, and there's really no impact from the windows of this this proposed upstairs on that south property. And plus there's a big garage on that south property too. So I think with that, I just would open it up if you have any questions for us.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? I do have one question for you. Did you I think you started to address this, but did you play around with the pitch of the roof? Is it, I couldn't quite tell, is it matching?
It's slightly steeper.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It's slightly steeper than the existing house.
Okay. But if you were to make it a less steep pitch, could you lower the ridge line a little bit?
Well, the problem is that you could theoretically lower the ridge line, but you end up losing interior space because the dormers and everything end up sitting lower. So we're already those dormer ceiling heights are only at 7 feet 3 inches. So we are doing our very best to keep everything low. And if we move the pitch even a few degrees, you know, this is a 12-12 and the house is a 10-12. So even if we move it down a little bit, it'll decrease the amount of ceiling height in those dormer areas, and it becomes really too low. We can not even meet building code at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. You'll have time to speak again in just a few minutes after we talk to the neighborhood association.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Is the registered neighborhood association here to testify? All right, it looks like Kate Henwood is here. Go ahead, Kate, and state your name and address for the record.
Thanks, Madam Chairwoman. Kate Henwood, 1116 North 12th Street. Yeah, of course, you know, there's always look at these with extra scrutiny when it is a contributing home. And we did have a few initial concerns, but I think those have been largely resolved since we first saw these plans. We appreciate the square footage being brought down. Of course, it's not ideal when the ADU is taller than the home, but obviously with a single story home, it looks like every effort has been made to keep this as short as possible. And I do think the width of the home is really helpful here in obscuring, you know, the majority of this structure. Also, I know this home from walking the neighborhood, and they have adorable chickens running in the yard and a little chicken coop also on the property. So lots of other things happening at this home. So I think, yeah, I think we support staff's recommendation on this one. As always, we would put in our plug for permeable paving, and I believe they already have spec'd shielded downlighting, which we appreciate. So yeah, we do support approval of these plans.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anybody else wishing to testify tonight? We don't have anybody signed up on the sheet. Okay. Seeing none, are there any last questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, Scott, if you're still online, you may come back on, and you have 5 minutes for rebuttal or additional comments if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, I don't think I have too much more to add, other than that we can definitely consider the permeable pavers. I think in the yard, we were already planning on that. And so, yeah, that we will work to do that. Other than that, I don't think we have anything else to add.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Is there any additional questions? Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and consider a motion or discussion.
I'll make a motion. I'll just note that I really do like the design of this ADU. We see a lot of designs on ADUs that are just like the craftsman style, because that's what's popular. So I like how this one actually has a modern touch to it, and really doesn't blend. It blends, but it doesn't create a false sense of history, which is always a concern that we have when we're adding a new building into a historic district. So I move to approve DRH 22-00300 based on the staff's analysis and findings contained within the staff report with the addition of permeable paving.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Malloy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Montoto. Christina, please call the roll, or actually, is there any additional discussion before she does that? Okay, go ahead and call the roll, please.
Otter,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Weaver,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Pape,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great, thank you. The next item that we'll hear tonight, which is our last item, is DRH 22-00303, Robert Parsons at 1206 West Lemp Street. Can we please have the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. So the applicant before you tonight has requested approval of some alterations to a contributing structure that would alter that character defining facade. And this is in the North End Historic District at 1206 West Lemp, on the north side of Lemp Street between 12th and 13th, just south of Camel's Back Park. So the applicants, and I'll let them expand on this in their presentation as well, but the applicant purchased the home in poor condition. There was an enclosed porch that was not structurally sound, shown here in these photos. It was enclosed with some plexiglass and some aluminum frame windows, I believe. So the applicant provided some imagery about what the existing conditions looked like in that porch. Some rather interesting construction techniques on the floor there, and some crumbling foundation and unsound walls. So they made a decision to remove the porch before it fell down, reconstructed it in the configuration seen here. Leaving it open with a vertical natural wood siding on that porch. In a condition of approval in the staff report, we would recommend that be sided and lap siding to match the house. That would be the traditional character of a porch, and then painted to match. Again, a front view of that rebuilt porch with the existing front door remaining there. With that, we have approved or recommended approval of the application. I will mention the vinyl windows on the home. There were vinyl windows installed throughout the home by the previous owner. The applicant would like to discuss some leniency. We do have a condition of approval recommending that all of those be replaced with appropriate material windows. Some time, I think the applicant is looking for some help on timing, in terms of when those are replaced and what that looks like, because this structure was bought in a fairly poor condition. They put a lot of work into it, and there are certainly some monetary concerns there. So, I believe the applicant will expand on that in their presentation as well. But with that, I would stand for any questions.
I can't remember looking through the report. Was there a historic photo of that house?
There is, and let me just get that pulled up real quick.
Okay. Do you know what year that was taken? By chance? Oh, 90. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question for Josh. Josh, the vinyl windows were in the house before the applicant bought it.
That's my understanding. I'll let them confirm that. Yes, but work done without appropriate permits. So we would, at the time of a certificate of appropriateness, look for all that to be remedied.
Okay, so we normally make, even though he didn't own the property, we normally make them actively correct somebody else's mistakes.
It's tricky, but ownership, doesn't, I guess, play into appropriate or inappropriate, alterations to a home. So if the work was done without a certificate of appropriateness, really the time to address that and rectify it is with a new certificate of appropriateness for this work. So, but, totally up to the commission's discretion about how to apply that. But I think typically we wouldn't necessarily consider ownership in that situation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, great, thank you. It looks like the applicant is present. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 20 minutes for our presentation.
Thank you.
Discussion.
Chairperson Weaver, commissioners, thanks for everything, being here, volunteering, all that. Name is Rob Parsons. My address is 1517 North Claremont Drive. We are the new owners, my wife and I, of the wonderful home at 1206 West Lamp. The home has had quite a varied history. The previous owner, I think, had it for 14 years and is employed at one of those reclaimed building supply stores, and had got first dibs at everything that came through the doorway. He applied everything he could to the home. Just to speak to the flooring, three or four different layers of flooring, which I think you saw a photo of before we actually found the original first floor. But he applied that to just about every surface, including there's actually one original window left. All the rest were replaced with vinyl. Is it okay for me to start the quick presentation on the porch? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
You can use that.
Okay. So again, we just purchased the homemade of this year. Our goal is to make it a safe single-family residence again. Basically does go back to the 1910, good character of the home. Yes, we failed in the fact that we did not get a certificate of appropriateness when we kind of started this project, and the front porch definitely caught us off guard when we had to address that. Yep, the photo on the right is the 1990 photo. Photo on the left is the basic state of affairs from the outside of the porch when we purchased the home. This photo is a pretty good snapshot of the rest of the home, but there's a little bit of everything there. There's some carpet, there's epoxy, there's exterior siding, interior molding. It's all there, including closet doors pretending to be shutters. This is a good snapshot of what we encountered inside. Doesn't really apply right now, but it gives a good example of the previous owner's artistic touch on every surface. So the photo on the left, this was one of the layers of the flooring that we encountered. Just to give an example of what our goal is. So we encountered the one on the left. The upper right photo is, we didn't know at the time, but it was the original 1910 for floor. We put the time and energy into saving and restoring it. And that's kind of our goal for the entire home, is to get it back as close to the 1910, that we can. Going back to the front porch, these are also examples of what the previous owner has done. So again, there's a little bit of everything in there. Wainscoting, fabric carpet, Again, layers upon layers upon layers. And we didn't know at the time, but it was doing a fine job of hiding the damage and wear and tear that the porch was dealing with. So as we peeled it back, it got basically, it ended up being a bit of an emergency. There was one bit of structural support. So it was half of a cinder block. The rest of the porch was basically resting on the ground. And so there's rot, dry rot from top to bottom. The one post that you see there on the left photo was hollow. So both the left, right posts were not truly structurally sound. So we basically replaced everything from the roof line down with the appropriate, structure, the right things actually in contact with the ground, support beams and whatnot. So it is actually built, to today's standards. So header, footer, all those things. And again, we did not try to increase the square footage, the height of the wall. We tried to maintain as much as we could of the original look and feel of the front porch. So just more examples of the solid construction. The photo on the right is just another, just kind of want to give you another example of the previous owner's artistic touch. So the siding on the left side, he basically just cut a hole, pulled out the siding, rotated, and then put it back in. There was never a doorway into that next room. So we've been dealing with that type of curveball throughout the program here. As recommended, I understand why staff wants a horizontal siding width instead of the vertical. We have no problem with that whatsoever. So we'll try to get as close to the lap that's on the house and replace the vertical siding there. And again, we've tried to be respectful to the neighbors and whatnot in this home. We are not trying to change really anything. Again, we're just trying to pick up the pieces of the previous owner, including poor maintenance and whatnot. I don't know if I have anything more to add. Any questions I can answer right now?
Are there any questions for the applicant?
I have a question. So they want you to correct the windows. What are you asking the leniency on that?
Well, I would love complete leniency, but if the project has gone so far beyond what we initially thought we would be dealing with. Ideally, right now I don't want to replace a single window. When the time comes to replace the window, absolutely, it's going to go back to an appropriate wood window. But that's, I would not like to pay for the previous owner's mistakes to that extent right now. Again, I'm still trying to fix everything else. So.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
How many windows are street facing at this point in time?
2.
And are all the windows vinyl?
There's one original window that he did not touch, and that is on the alley side in the bedroom.
Okay.
So otherwise there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 windows, basically, 2 per side. They're all vinyl.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Do you know what year those vinyl windows were installed?
I've tried to go through all the records and document. I don't. And I know that there have been some reports from inspectors and whatnot that have been in the home prior to my. I know there's a fire in the home, so I know that there's some documentation there. I'm hoping that maybe some of my guests behind me will have some idea when those changes occurred, but it was all done prior to May 2022.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Oh, I do have one more question, and maybe others who are going to testify can speak to this. Do you happen to have any photos of the house prior to 1990?
I've gone through both the state historical folks and the city, and it is the only photo in the files.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you'll have a chance for rebuttal in
Thank
just a
you.
little bit. It's a registered neighborhood association here to testify. Go ahead, Kate. Oh, Kate, go ahead. I think you might be muted if you're talking.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Thanks, Madam Chairwoman. Kate Henwood, 116 North 12th Street. So I actually live right down the street from this property. So I also know it well and have seen these folks out there doing the work. Of course, we would have preferred a permit have been in place prior to demolition. And one of the goals of our little group is to educate folks so they, know ahead of time that this, would fall within the requirement for a C of A. But, and hope that any, at this point, obviously they're aware, and hope that any other forthcoming or applicable changes would get pre-approval. But we, agree that the porch was in disrepair and certainly needed attention. I guess one thing we were curious about is just, and Commissioner Malloy mentioned this on the last application, just kind of the idea that we don't want to mimic history. And so we're not quite clear on if we should be asking them, clearly not changing the footprint, but if, design wise. That's been part of the discussion so far, but just we were just curious about that. If we, what the design is that we're striving for, if it is to, match what was there, but again, with the lack of photos prior to 1990, maybe we don't know exactly what that was. So anyway, just something we wanted to note. So we do support staff's recommendation. We assume the porch will have lighting, so we would request that it be downshielded, but that's it for comments from us.
All right, great. Thank you very much. I'm thinking you can answer that when we discuss the project. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to testify tonight? All right, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Michael Tobin, and I'm the neighbor 2 houses down 1907 North 12th Street. I've been there since 91, so now I'm the oldest resident on the block and seen the history of the place. It's a very, very small place. How many square feet is it?
Well, it depends now.
Yeah.
The record says 620. It's not 620.
Yeah, and it's in the back of the lot. But we're all very happy to have Rob and his family working on the place. The history, especially the previous owner, was not a great neighbor, to say the least. And so the care that Rob is applying to the place, we're very supportive of it. And I know obviously not getting the permit was a mistake, but I think he will remedy that in the future. And I just want to lend my support for what he's doing with the location and his intentions. And I think he'll be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Great. And I think there was a question earlier if we knew when the windows were installed. Do you have any idea on that?
I don't know, but it could have been at 3 a.m. because the previous owner was a night owl, and the machines, power tools were going all night. And it was probably within the last 5 years is my guess. And if you take a close look at the house, and the pictures do a good job at describing the patchwork that this guy was trying to apply, it is truly phenomenal what he thought was appropriate. And so I support Rob taking a lot of that down and trying to create a more historic or appropriate quality place. And I have a history also with a historic board in our place. And And first our house was deemed non-contributing, and then I remodeled it, and then it was deemed contributing. So there was some inconsistency in what the rules are. And then I wanted to do an addition, take down part of our place, which was dilapidated in the back. And they said I couldn't take it down because it was more than 50 years old. So the guidelines are confusing, but obviously it's clear he should have gotten a certificate of appropriateness. But it sounds like you're quite clear on that. Anyway, I'm just lending my support. That's about all I have to say. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Go ahead and come up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, and you'll also have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm Tommy Smith, and I live at 1601 North 10th, and I'm actually somewhat responsible for selling I was the listing agent. So, and I knew that aesthetically it was very unique. I didn't realize that structurally it was as unsound as this, but I do know, and I gotten to know Rob. I just kind of go around the neighborhood quite a bit, and he's done an enormous amount to improve it. Like I think the previous owner, he had like those slat closet doors. He used those as window shades. Or not siding, and shutters. And I mean, he loved the planter shades and stuff. So, and you took like 15 loads to the dump? So, yeah, it was kind of an eyesore, really. And I think that Rob has done a lot to improve it. And then the other thing too is, I mean, it does set back a fair amount. And I know that in the past, there's been other houses that it was on Riddenbaugh that the gal didn't know that she was supposed to have wood. And so they allowed those retroactively and stuff. And I just like what Rob has done with the house so far. And I think the question is that I think Ed bought the house in like 2008. So sometime between that time and when he sold it here last year, it was that's probably when Ed got the vinyl windows, because as Rob stated that Ed, he worked down at the reuse it place and he got first dibs on all this stuff. And so if it was a window, he just kind of cut the house to fit the window. So, I mean, it's, and if you need any trim, he's got another house that we need to sell and that he's got like, it would fill. Oh, okay. Anyway, so.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to testify? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Marissa Alden, and I live at 1906 North 12th Street. My husband and I bought the house and moved in November of 2020, so we haven't been there very long. But we did watch the transition of this property from post-fire problematic to what it became before it was sold to what the new owner has done. And I mostly just want to reiterate and say I second pretty much everything that Mr. Tobin said a few minutes ago. I just want to show my support for our new neighbor and say that my house, actually my front porch faces his property. So I can see everything on that property directly from my front porch. So I do have substantial interest in what it looks like and how things are done. And so far, we're pretty happy with what we're seeing. So, and I will just say, I like the idea of the open porch too. I mean, we moved to the neighborhood in part because it's a kind of a front yard, front porch neighborhood, and people spend time out there, and we do that. And we like that that's an option as well. So that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wishing to testify or anybody online? Okay, great. So you're welcome to come back up and you'll have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
No rebuttal. I think the one question that come up that has not been answered is front porch lighting. It will have appropriate lighting both on the wall and in the ceiling of the front porch, which is where we believe it was originally.
Great.
Okay.
Are there any last minute questions for the applicant?
I do have one question. Is your intention to live in the home with your family?
Unfortunately, no.
No.
No, I have 3 kids in a one bedroom.
That was my thought. Is there any plan on expansion? That was where I was going with that. So,
No, right now we're just going to make it a rental. And actually not at the current rental standards. We're going to make it a more of affordable rental there are folks in dire need out there, and we're going to try to make it a little bit lower for those folks. There'll be an interview process. And long term, we have not quite figured out what we're going to do with it yet. The home placement on the lot is interesting. It really hugs the alley, and so there's a whole lot of green space beyond the rest of the lot. So maybe long term we may, go through the right process, get a certificate of appropriateness, and maybe consider putting another home on the lot. We're not anywhere near that yet, but that's potential.
thank you so much.
Great. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any last minute questions for staff? Okay. Hearing none, I will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and stand for a motion or discussion.
I'll open it up for discussion. I'm glad he's rehabilitating the property. I guess my concern is having him take the burden of fixing all of the windows on the house. I sort of like what you were getting at, doing maybe the front facing windows at this time. And then maybe, I don't know if we could condition it that they have to do it, later in a couple of years, but at least not all of them all at once, because he didn't do it.
Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can add to that. Yeah, I totally agree. And just from a sustainability standpoint, if these vinyl windows have been installed at some point in the last 15 years, they could potentially still have some lifespan. And I don't think it makes sense to throw something that's perfectly functioning, even though it's not ideal and does not fit within our guidelines. I still don't think it makes sense to throw them out. So I would support a condition that they be replaced. Can we put a timeline on it, Josh?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Montoto, it would be difficult to put a timeline on it, but assuming the windows are replaced through the proper process, we would require, when these windows hit the end of their lifespan, they're replaced, we'll require that they're metal, clad wood, or fiberglass, as long as the proper process is followed. So it isn't super necessary to place some sort of future restriction. We'll require it.
Then in that case, thank you, Josh. I would support the staff's recommendations of approval at this point with no mention of the windows at this time.
I would support that too.
Great. So is there any other discussion?
I would recommend changing the lap siding though, not the up and down, although you may have a different opinion about. There's no way to know what the historic porch looked like is the issue, correct? Like there's no pictures other than that 1990 picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's one picture where the siding was vertical, but there was no. Interior, but that was vertical slab, but it was definitely not.
It's probably horizontal, so
yeah,
I think that can stay in. Yeah,
I agree. I would recommend to keep that recommendation to do the horizontal lap siding and match the house as recommended.
I'm happy to make a motion unless there's any other discussion. I move to approve item DRH 22-00303 based on staff's findings and analysis contained within the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Montoto. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Maroney.
We need to, because the staff report says that he has to change out the windows. That's the condition of the staff report.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Then I will, can I amend my motion? I amend my motion to be, I move to approve DRH 22-00303 based on staff's analysis and findings contained within the staff report, striking the condition that the windows be replaced.
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion, a second. Do you want any discussion on that before call the roll? Okay, hearing none. Christina, can you please call the roll?
Otter,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Weaver,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Pape,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great, thank you. That concludes our hearing for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for participating.